Welcome to day 66. We are in Deuteronomy's chapter 5 and 6, Psalm 43, and Mark 14. Now, here we get another version of the stone tablet commandments. We've already had one. Here is another one. And, read it. It'll sound familiar to most of you. What I think is more interesting here is in chapter 6, verses 4 and 5, we get to what is called in the Jewish community the Shema. And this is the heart of Jewish belief. There is one and only one God, the God of Israel, and we are to love God with all of our being, all our heart, mind, soul, strength. So this is really like the foundational bedrock verse for Jewish believers. And it is a verse that is then quoted by Jesus later on in the New Testament when he is asked, what is the most important commandment? He says this, and then he adds on to it, and to love your neighbors as you love yourself. So I just want to lift this up as a critical verse that we need to be familiar with, that we need to remember. It goes on to talk about remembering God's word and putting it on our hearts, our doorposts, our minds, our hands. Now, some people have taken this literally, and they have little boxes with Hebrew scriptures in them that they tie onto their hands and to their heads. They have little metal tubes that they nail on their doorposts that has the Shema in it from, this section of Deuteronomy. I think that God and Moses are not being literal here. I think what they're talking about is we should be living our life where we are always thinking about God, where God is on our mind, where God is on our hands in our action, where God is in our heart in the way that we love God and love the people around us. And so I think the point here is to know God's word. So we need to be reading the Bible regularly and know it and be putting into action through the decisions we make, the choices we make, the things we think about, the actions that we take. And then there's a section about some of the stuff that we have. And I think it's important to remember that what we have because God has given it to us. So Moses is reminding people that God took them out of Egypt, that the Holy Land that they're going to be moving into, they may have some buildings, they may have some fields, they may have some grazing lands that they get to take advantage of, but they have all of these benefits because God gave it to them. And there are some people today who really are emphasizing that people need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and that we need to be self-reliant and independent. But even today, everything we have because someone before us prepared it for us. We have God's word because someone listened to God and wrote down God's word and copied it through the ages and printed it us and put it on, audio tapes and on YouTube for us to be able to access today. We have houses, we have wealth, we have streets and water systems because someone has come before us and prepared all of these things. So I think we all need to remember that all of our businesses, our cleared land, our built cities, we all depend on God and the people who've come before us for the resources that we enjoy today. When we get to Psalm 43, I just want to point out that traditionally Psalms 42 and 43 were together. No one really knows when they got separated. 43 tends to look back a little bit more, and 42 looks back a little more, and 43 looks forward a little more, and perhaps that's why they got separated at one point. But the main focus of this short psalm is to turn to God and to turn away, that when we turn to God, we can turn away from the darkness and despair in our lives. Mark chapter 14 is very long. It covers a whole lot of stuff. It is not an easy chapter. It starts with Jesus being anointed with perfume by a woman, and the people that are with Jesus get very angry that this woman is wasting money on expensive perfume and then putting it on his feet. I think when I listen to Jesus' response, I have two questions that come to my mind. First of all, how often are we judging and arguing over the actions of others today? What this woman didn't impact these guys who were arguing about it. She didn't ask them for money. There was nothing she did that impacted them at all. but they felt they had the right to argue over the choices she was making in her life. And I think this is a temptation we still have today, to be looking at the choices that other people are making and get into big fights over it. The second question is, what have I been willing to seriously sacrifice for Jesus? I mean, this woman spent roughly a year's wages on this perfume to give to Jesus. Have I ever done anything that was equivalent to a year's wages to give to God and God's work here on earth? I think that is a super challenging question for us to think about, what are we willing to give to Jesus? We then have Jesus sharing the Passover meal with his followers. He calls out the traitor that is eating with them, but does not name him, causing everyone to get into a kerfluffle, wondering if it is them. Then we have the Gethsemane section. And here I want to lift up that Jesus takes time to go off and pray for hours. He knows he's about to be arrested. He knows everything that's going to happen. He asks God for a reprieve, which shows us that, if we're facing something we don't really want to face, we can go to God for help, or even to see if there's some way that we can get out of doing it. In this case, God's like, nope, we're sticking with the plan. And Jesus is obedient and follows through. The other thing that I always love about this is how the disciples 3 times fall asleep while waiting for Jesus. You'd think they could stay awake praying, right? No. I mean, can any of us do that? So again, let's not be judging other people in the choices they've made. But I think it is really important to see how important prayer is, and that even at this really critical evening, Jesus takes time to pray and be with God. And then we get to Jesus' arrest in the dark. Jesus points out that he had been available during the day at the temple. They could have arrested him far easier, anytime, anywhere, for weeks, months. And instead, they do it at night. They bring a whole bunch of extra soldiers around. It is like he's the, FBI's 10 most wanted criminal situation. And I really started reflecting on how this is one of those ways that we can check if what we're doing is holy and righteous in our own life. If we're doing stuff that we're doing alone when no one else can see us, maybe we're doing it at night, maybe we're sneaking around, those are probably indications that what we're doing is not God's will. We know it's not right, and so we're hiding it. When we do stuff with others in the bright sunshine of day, and I think about this with our government, for a long time, a bill was introduced, it was printed up, it was posted, all the lawmakers would read the bill, there would be open hearings, there would be debates. People in the community, both lobbyists and voters and citizens, people affected by the law, could come together and debate it. They could argue it. There were hearings, there was testimony. It took a long time. It was annoying how long it took to pass laws. But recently, there have been a lot of laws that have been passed where our lawmakers got the text of the law at night, and within just a few hours they were voting on it. No one, not even the lawmakers, could read the entire text of the bills they were passing. No one in the public knew about. Journalists didn't have access to it, lobbyists didn't have access to it, voters didn't have access to it. And I think this is one of those places where we can look and say, I think something is broken in our community when we're trying to do stuff on the down low, when it's dark, when people don't know about it, when we can't share and discuss the choices that we are making as a community. And so I think that's one of the takeaways from this section of the story is, are we doing stuff that is not transparent? Because maybe something about it isn't as holy and righteous as we'd like it to be. Jesus goes along and takes on his arrest and his trial and his beating, and the disciples scatter. I'm just going to say, there's a lot in this chapter. It is hard to read. It is hard to understand. And frankly, I think the whole chapter is a reflection of the very complicated and messy history of humanity going back millennia. Everything that happens here shows the brokenness of human society and the reason that we needed Jesus to come to show us a new way to live and to show us what God's grace really looks like. chew on that for a day, and we'll see you next time.